Yeah, it includes the minutes. It includes under city attorney C1.
Yes, C1 is a waiver of the requirement to hold certain land use and zoning hearings after 5 o'clock. We have a case coming up in June involving the Orlando Health project just south of the Parkway. That's going to challenge possibly our virtual hearing technology. I think there is some decent community neighborhood interest in that, so we'll have to see what we need to do to be ready for that. But that is what we need the waiver for that particular case. But all that does is waive the requirement to hold one of the hearings after 5.
Okay.
All right. The next item on consent agenda.
Any questions on that by anybody at all? Okay, go ahead.
The next item. Okay. Next item on consent under my portion of the agenda is a ground lease agreement with the Peace River Center at 1831 Gilmore Avenue. You're probably all familiar with this complex. It's a fairly large complex of various different nonprofit organizations, Achievement Academy, Peace River, the Girl Scouts have been located there. This is a new lease with the Peace River Center, although they are currently located at this facility and have been operating at this facility since 2012. The original lease goes back to the 1960s, 1965. It was a 99-year lease with the community, Community Health and Service Center, which sort of acted as a clearinghouse to sublease these various different parcels in here to nonprofit organizations. They did a sublease with the Girl Scouts in 1973. The Girl Scouts built a building on this property. And once again, have now subleased their lease to the Peace River Center. Peace River now wants to purchase that building. The Girl Scouts no longer want to lease that to Peace River. They're going to use the proceeds from the sale of that building to locate their operations elsewhere. And in the process of Peace River seeking to purchase this building, there were some title issues that came up, and Peace River decided that they needed a direct lease with the city instead of a sublease with the Girl Scouts. So that's what this is a direct lease with the city. It's the same general terms and conditions as the original lease for this property, but it's directly with the city. It's the same lease term, not the 99 years, which will expire in 2064. The rent's $1 a year, given that it's a nonprofit. Peace River will pay all utilities, maintenance, and taxes for the property. They're responsible for all maintenance inside and outside of the property. They will indemnify the city. They maintain general liability insurance of $1 million per person, $3 million per occurrence, and names the city as an additional insurer on those policies. The city has the right to terminate the lease if Peace River defaults. If we decide to terminate without cause, then we have an obligation to relocate Peace River to a comparable facility. One change from the way this appeared when it was originally published Wednesday is that the agreement now provides that upon the expiration of the agreement in 2064, if the parties don't renew by mutual agreement the lease, the city has no obligation to pay Peace River for the building. And that is recommended for your approval.
Any questions at Commissioner Reed?
You're muted.
Oh, you're still muted, sir. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you.
There you go.
Farmer, did you make that one change? I thought we said we made that one change.
That's correct. So upon expiration, there's no obligation of the city to purchase the building if the parties don't decide to renew the lease, extend the lease.
Right. Okay, because and so you did make that change?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Other questions on that one? Peace River's been in that probably 8 years, haven't they, or so?
I think since 2012.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, the next item of consent is 6C6. Subordination of the city's interest to the counties for the county's West Pickering Road road widening project. We have numerous electric and water easements that go along that linear corridor of West Pipkin, and all we're doing is subordinating that to the city's right-of-way interests. But it's part of this agreement. If we have to relocate, or if the county makes us relocate our facilities in order to accommodate their project, the county has the obligation to pay for any kind of relocation or modification expenses that the city incurs.
Any questions on that? Okay. That takes us into recommendations regarding municipal board appointments. And can we do that short of a board's and appoint a municipal board's meeting first, committee meeting?
Yes, we're doing, using a separate approach given what we're doing right now with virtual meetings.
Okay. So in that recommendation, any questions? You want to read through them, Palmer, just so that it's on record?
Well, I don't think I have the list, unfortunately.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have the list. I can read through them.
Okay, that'd be great.
Once again, as Palmer noted, in an effort to streamline the process while we're doing these virtual meetings, we are going to recommend the following municipal board committee appointments. Under Code Enforcement Board, from a recommendation by Jim Daney, a reappointment of Tom Gage to his first full 3-year term beginning June 1st, 2020, ending May 31st, 2023. Mr. Gage has just completed a partial term. The next one under Code Enforcement Board would be a recommendation again from Jim Daney to appoint Jordan Corbin as a regular member to a 3-year term beginning June 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 23. Mr. Corbin was serving as an alternate member up to this point. Under Lakeland Housing Authority, a recommendation from the mayor to appoint David Samples to serve a 4-year term beginning May 1st, ending April 30th of 24. Under Nuisance Abatement Board, a recommendation from the mayor to reappoint Daniel Price to an additional 3-year term beginning June 16th and ending June 15th of 23. Staff is requesting the commission approve these appointments.
Any questions on any of those appointments, Commissioner McCarley and then Commissioner Walker?
I was going to move to accept them if we needed a motion, but.
All right, Commissioner Walker.
I can second the motion, but I do have a question.
All right, so motion's moved to second. Any question?
Yes, on the housing authority situation, who is the gentleman replacing? And do we still have a good, diverse board there?
Yes, on the diverse board, we have John Richardson, Reverend Richardson is being replaced by David Samples. Reverend Richardson's termed out. He's been a fabulous member of the Housing Authority Board, but he's termed out. And so under the current bylaws that we have to respect the terms. David Samples is a banker who has a lot of empathy with people and interest in fair housing and good financial experience.
Oh yeah, I know, Mr. Mayor. I know who he is. I mean, I don't know him one-on-one, but I know about him, that kind of thing. But I want to make sure, as you say, replacing Richardson, as I heard you indicate, I just want to make sure still we got a good mix there on that board.
Yes, sir. And that it's part of what we were conscious of as well. All those in favor of the approval that are on the committee signify by saying aye. Opposed, same. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, before we leave that, there are some side notes associated with the boards and committees. Those being under Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, we're still looking for one member who would be engaged in the affordable home building industry. Under Code Enforcement Board, we're looking for one member to be an alternate, must be a city resident. Under PERC, Public Employees Relation Commission, and we're still looking for 3 members. One member who represents management, obviously one member representing the employees, and one member who represents neither. And then under Zoning Board Adjustments and Appeals, looking for one member must be a city resident. And those are some notes attached to this item.
Good. So if anyone is monitoring this and interested, please go through the process of signing in and putting your application in for the boards that you'd be most interested in. And Commissioner McCarley, were you going to say something? Yes, go ahead.
Something different. Is that okay? A question?
That's fine. Sure.
Okay. I'm not sure where this falls within the agenda or agenda study, but I'd like to request that we make a motion to return to our just bi-monthly meetings instead of the weekly meetings. I don't know if we're in a good place to do that yet, but I wanted to put that on the table, and I thought agenda study was the good place to put that. I don't know how everybody feels or if we're not quite ready for it yet. I just was thinking about it.
It's a good place to put it, and specifically, it's on my notes at the very end of the meeting to talk about, we certainly need to do it for the Monday, the 11th meeting, because we have communications having to be in two places at the same time. And so if there is the feeling that certainly we could go back to the bi-monthly meetings, that's one item we can discuss, and there's no reason not to talk about it right now. And but even if you're uncomfortable with that, we should do it for the 11th meeting because we will have met before that anyway. So conversation on that. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree with Commissioner McCauley. I do believe still that I think we should get past that. I thought that I would say the first part of May, just to make sure when we see this, what we call the reopening happening here on the 4th. And of course, what we're doing this weekend with the trails and those particular areas that are opening up today and through the weekend here, just see how things go. I think pretty much between about, I think, middle of May, we should be able to see us go back to what I call that part of normalcy.
And so if we were going to skip the 11th anyway, due to the difficulty in their being able to broadcast it, that really means that we just start to say, as of May, we'll go back to our regular schedule. Do you have a problem with that, Commissioner Walker?
No, because we would have had the first meeting in May, and then the next one won't be until after the 11th anyway, as we're just discussing.
Correct. Mr. Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And obviously, the commission has the authority to call a special meeting at any given time. So if there is by chance some major information received either state or federally or even locally, we will continue to update you as we've been trying to, but obviously the updates are slowing down a bit because there's not much going on other than some reopenings. But you have the right to call a special meeting at any given time. All we have to do is notice it accordingly. All
right, so let's vote on that. If you want to return to the normal schedule, could Commissioner McCauley make that as a motion?
I move that we return to our regular bi-monthly schedule for the City Commission of Lakeland.
A second from Commissioner Franklin and Walker, and they were very enthusiastic. Discussion, Commissioner Reed.
They're getting, so we're going to start back. We'll have another meeting. We'll have agenda study on Friday, the 7th or something like that. What's the 11th? What's to happen on the 11th?
That was going to be a special meeting that we have already set in our calendars. So they're setting up for a meeting on the 12th, which is our, I think that's our meeting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's your strategic planning meeting being set up at the RP Funding Center.
And so because they're at the RP Funding Center, they can't do both because it takes a great deal of time to set that up, as you know. And that's the one that we're present for.
So when will our first meeting, a regular meeting, be then?
It'll be the first and third Mondays of the months, just as we have done historically. Our next regular meeting's the one Monday.
Yeah, it'll be the 4th, and then you'll have another one on the 18th.
Okay, 18th, what I was looking for.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same. Opposed, Commissioner McLeod, or not? I didn't see your hand till late. You're okay. It's unanimously passes. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before you go forward, I understand that we're having some technological problems. I don't know if Kevin can fill us in on that, but I don't think we're being broadcast live, which may be an issue.
Yeah, so we've had equipment failure in the AV control room. The router has failed. We're diligently trying to replace that router. But we're recording and so we can definitely play back once this meeting's over. But as Palmer has alluded to, we are not live. We're diligently trying to replace a router, and it's going to take a little bit longer than the course of this meeting, I'm sure.
Oh, okay. So Palmer, are you comfortable with that?
No, I can't say I'm really comfortable with it. you can always correct the sunshine law issue subsequently. And, we are going to revisit all of these issues on Monday at a full city commission meeting where people have the right to participate. How long do you think it'll take, Kevin?
Palmer, it's a router. We have to get a new router and put it in the rack. They're just not sitting around.
And then you have to do IP addresses for each of the ports.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner McCarley. Yeah.
Palmer, if we have press on called in or dialed in, would that work or no? Do we have press in, Kevin?
I can forward them the meeting notice. I know that I think we've got a few of them online now listening because I've been texting them because we got a handful of callers on and let them know that this is the way they could watch or listen to the meeting because of the equipment failure.
I don't see a press name that I recognize.
No, it would just be a call. They called in, they're just listening on their phone. It wouldn't be.
Okay. Commissioner Franklin.
So Mayor, normally for our agenda studies, the public can listen in live, but there's not the opportunity to interact. I don't know, Palmer, would we satisfy the requirements if we were able to publish this recording later so everyone would be able to see exactly what was said?
I think there's still some technical issues, but I think that we can get by because we're going to repeat all of this business on Monday. I mean, all the items that you voted on today, though, I think we need to re-vote on. I think that was the municipal board appointments, the decision to not hold the weekly special meetings. So I think we need to revisit those. As far as the agenda items, I think we just need to go through them all in full on Monday, and that will correct any technical issues we're having.
Okay, Kevin, Mr. Cook.
Just want to let you know quickly, again, we are recording. That piece of equipment has not failed. So as soon as this meeting's over, we'll send it out and get it on all of our media channels. Unfortunately, it's the router that sends the signal to Fios, Spectrum, and of course our streaming signal. That's the router that has failed. So we're diligently trying to get that replaced in a rack.
Okay, Commissioner Walker.
Just on a comment, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and somewhat, I guess, what Commissioner Franklin and Commissioner McCauley mentioned. We've noticed the meeting, and I'm going back to some years back before we were doing live stream as we are now. Kevin, if you can help me with that. We always noticed, we always had people maybe to come or show up, but what's different than what we did before we went live streaming like we are now? And actually, you and Palmer, I guess, to answer that for me. What's the difference?
So what would be different is we would have the meeting in a live setting. As you know, back in the early days in 2000, we didn't even broadcast live television. We went straight to tape and ran it to Auburndale to Time Warner Cable, and then plugged it into their video head, and we aired the meetings at 6 p.m. The days that they took place. That was just because of the technology back then. So the difference, Commissioner, would be the fact that before we started broadcasting and before the element of coronavirus has hit us, we would have a live meeting setting where individuals could come and see you guys in a live setting. But because of the impacts of COVID-19 and this virtual setting, it's sort of a closed loop, if you will. Like I said, I sent the meeting notice out to the media, and they can certainly tune in now. So that's what I've done, trying to rectify it.
And as long as we, I guess, as long as we're doing what our legal counsel is sharing with us, making sure that we capture something today. If I hear you again, Mr. Palmer, capture what we do today on Monday, we should be okay with whatever else that's being done as far as the media being intact as they are now. If I hear Mr. Cook correct, and as well as being able to play this particular setting for anyone who wants to hear it. Is that correct?
Well, the requirements of the Sunshine Law, one of the requirements of the Sunshine Law is that a meeting be open to the public, and this is partially open to the public. However, as Commissioner Franklin said, with agenda studies, there's no right of the public to participate, and we will be rebroadcasting this later. And then there's always also the option to correct the sunshine law violation later by a full meeting. So I think on Monday, instead of just having an approval of consent items, we'll go ahead and just go through those in full again. And once again, hold the votes that we held today on Monday as well. And I think that will get us where we need to get as far as sunshine requirements.
All right. Well, on that basis, let's continue. All right.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm looking. Oh, yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, well, and Palmer, I think you may have just answered my question, but I was wondering if we refrain from voting going forward on anything, if that would keep us on a stronger ground, and then, as you had mentioned, re-voting on the items that we did vote on.
Correct.
I actually think that's going to work for us anyway on everything that we're going along. Mr. Cook.
Just to let you know, I just texted Sarah Walsh and Barry Friedman, who are our typical, and Barry, you can see Barry has joined us and Sarah is joining us. So now we have our two local media. The text also went out to our television coverage with Fox, NBC, ABC, and CBS. So as you can see now, we have media online. So they're with us now.
Excellent. All right. Well, then we will move forward. So that brings the, we've gone through the consent items. We have no requests appeared from the general public. We do have an equalization hearings portion of this meeting.
And those are just the typical lots cleaning and clearing assessments that you see on a regular basis. Nothing unusual there.
Any questions by anybody on those? All right. Public hearings, ordinances, second reading.
The two items we have for ordinances for consideration relate to the Bridgewater development just south of 33. It's the addition of 100 lots on the northern portion of that development where the golf course used to be. And I see Teresa coming on. She may be able to throw up a map again to show where this is or answer any questions.
Are there any questions by commissioners? Good morning, Teresa.
Good morning.
Commissioner Reed, do you have one? I see your mic's open.
Thank you. There again, I'm familiar with that property up there. Looked at it several times, and there again, I think that's a good idea. We need to get more houses up that way to get some more impact fees and stuff like that. So I'm all for it.
And have happy residents who are able to live in that wonderful area, right? Any other questions or comments? Let's go to number 2.
That is also related to the Bridgewater development, the 100 new lots. That's the zoning component. The first item was the land use amendment to the comp plan. So this is the second one's an amendment to the PUD for that.
So I'm presuming there's no questions on that. All right. And then miscellaneous.
Under miscellaneous, we are one of the few certified local governments for comprehensive planning in the state, which allows most of our comp plan amendments to not have to go through a state and regional review, which expedites the approval time that developments within the city have. But one of the requirements of this certification that we have is that we do an annual report, and I think Teresa has something to say on that, and then on Monday we'll have a more full report as required by law.
I do have a couple of, sorry, Mayor. I do have a couple of slides if Kevin can give me access to the screen.
He is doing it now.
Yeah, I'm doing it now. Thank you.
By the way, this is a plan that we are so grateful that is done annually, and it is unusual for cities to do this. So thank you again for keeping that current. Commissioner Walker, while she's getting access.
And I think that's important for all of us to know, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for sharing that, because you have cities that are larger than us that do not have this particular situation where we can take advantage of. And I know some years ago when it was brought to our attention that our staff had done such a magnificent job to make sure that we were able to have this proper certification process without having to go to the state and get all those other approvals that so many other cities or towns have to do. I think it's important we know that we're one of the few.
Excellent.
That's correct, Commissioner Walker. We are one of the few, and as part of being designated as a certified community, it shows that we have a commitment to maintaining a compact development within the city, and that we also have staff that is at a higher level in terms of their professional certifications. When we entered into the program, there was, as Palmer mentioned, an agreement that coincided with that. And part of that agreement is that we report annually, and we have to report on certain metrics that were included in that original agreement. So as you go through the report, you'll see there's a pretty extensive table that's included as attachment D to that report. That shows a comparison of baseline measurements at the time we entered into the agreement, and then where we've been in the past 3 years leading up to the current year statistics. The certified area is, for the most part, the city of Lakeland limits, with the exception of the Green Swamp area of critical state concern. So as you can see in this map, everything that's shaded in gray is within that special area and is not subject to the expedited review process. So within that area, we still have to go through a pretty rigorous review, given the sensitivity of that area and the environmental concerns. You'll see as you look at that attachment D that for the most part, we are either meeting or maintaining what our expected levels are. And particularly this year, we did have some increases in the residential density and compactness measurements. Also an increase in the number of households receiving down payment assistance and housing rehabilitation assistance. And there's been a reduction in the number of substandard housing units. There are a couple of areas where there's been a slight decrease in what we have as a target area. For instance, sidewalk gaps, there has been an increase, a slight increase again, in the gaps that we have within the city. And when you look at the jobs and housing balance, which is on page 13 of the report, we want to maintain or increase that over time from what that baseline condition was. And from 2018 to 2019, that percentage did go down a slight bit by 0.2 of a point. So from 0.43 to 0.42. But otherwise, we are meeting our goals. And at the end of this year, you'll see an update to the comprehensive plan. That'll be a pretty major effort. And you will see within that plan where we have levels of service that correspond with what our capital improvements projects are needed to maintain those levels of service.
Can you talk about the sidewalks for just 1 second on the, you actually are wanting that number to go down in terms of this measurement or up in terms of what we have built?
You want it to go, up in terms of the number of miles that you have within the city, but you want to reduce the gaps. And so it's been reported, and it's changed in the way it's been reported over time. So 335 miles, and now it says 339 miles as the target. Okay.
And the change in reporting, I also was looking over at on page 12, 3C, the pedestrian access, the miles of sidewalk.
Yes.
That showed 313, and then now we're at 266. How is it possible that's less?
When you look at the 2017 reporting year, there's a note there that says new GIS technology used. So it's just a matter of over time, it was using one data set to report the numbers and a different methodology. And as that methodology changed, so too did the number. But you can see after that change in the technology from 18 to 19, it was relatively the same with the exception of three miles there.
So we may have really over-reported on the 313 because of the methodology used at the time.
Yes.
In 2016, got it. Okay. Other questions by commissioners? Commissioner Madden, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just was looking at my attachments, and I'm not seeing where you're looking at the additional addendums. Looking at my agenda.
It'll open up that report, and then if you go 12 pages in, you'll see the chart.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't want to take any additional time here, but I just am looking under B miscellaneous, government comprehensive plan. And it just had mine. Okay, so now there it goes. Okay, thank you.
So you can look at that while I entertain Commissioner McLeod has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Teresa, on some of the areas for the goals where we see, like for sidewalks, for example, it says increase. I saw another one that says improve. Do we have specific metrics that we're aiming for in some of those areas?
Yes, so it would be either to maintain or improve from the baseline measurement, which is on the far left of the table. So the very first column, those were the baseline conditions as we entered into the agreement with the state. And then that's what we're reporting year after year to ensure that we're meeting that goal. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just like you see on page 15, the affordable housing ownership, our baseline there was 2.86, and we are now at 4.73. Our goal is to reduce back to 2.76.
Correct.
Any new information on that arena in terms of planning?
Well, it was very obviously heavily focused on homeownership, our affordable housing programs in the past. And so I think going forward, when we look at creating a new set of measurements through the agreement, once we have our new plan adopted, that's probably one of the things that we want to look at and say, one, is that realistic? And two, is that really what the goal is? And do we want to have a better mix of housing units and understand that rental is part of that, even if it is multifamily? I think, again, that was just the focus at the time when this was done, several years back, and even our affordable housing programs reflected that focus on home ownership.
When could we include that? Because I think that makes a big difference. I would keep them both just so that we obviously are measuring them, but it'd be nice to have those side by side.
Sure.
What's entailed to do that?
So what would be entailed is for us to amend the evaluation criteria and the measurements. And I think the appropriate time to do that would be with the update to the comprehensive plan that is happening later this year. So once we have the plan document, that's going to have all updated data, population and economics that we can look at and better understand what those measurements should be. Okay, so I would say at the end of this year, we would do that.
Commissioner McCarley.
Thank you, Mayor. And Teresa, on these, what part is the state assign the evaluative tools and what part do we assign? Is this all based on us and your department and working with the commission and the management team, or is some of the state regulated? Because I feel like the comprehensive plan comes from the state.
Sure. So it's really your plan. And so there are certain requirements that you have to have within your comprehensive plan. And as far as this certification report, this is a mechanism of the agreement with DEO on what we're to report annually through the certification program. So I think as an agreement with DEO, if there are things that you as a commission want to change or add, that's something we would just work through with them as we prepare the next agreement and incorporate those items.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Mr. Cook.
I just want to let everyone know that we are now broadcasting on all media channels. We are now broadcasting on all media channels.
You are so much more efficient than even you think. It's incredible.
It's the staff. We're blessed.
Thank you. Yes, we are. And I don't mean that lightly. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Walker.
I'm just, again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hate to just overemphasize what was shared just now by Ms. Teresa, and also sharing with our colleagues how, we're standing in a particular certification process where we are, and we're looked upon. I know when several of you do attend and be around the FLC organization in its meetings, with Lakeland is looked at as being one of the premier cities in our state, and how we operate and how efficient and how effective and still having the kind of staff that we have here in our city to bring about the kind of quality of life that we have here for our citizens as well. And I don't take it for granted. I'm sure you don't either, but I think we should not lose sight of how important it is to for us, of course, and how important it is to other citizens that can look at what we're doing and how best we do things, our best practices, etc. Thank you so much.
Well, and we certainly appreciate your perspective, which you have from the large investment of time in Florida League of Cities. So thank you for emphasizing that again. And Teresa, thank you for the work. I do think there are things, as you understand, we'd like to do on the amendment side as we go along, particularly in that one area. And so we might, you probably have others you'd like to recommend, and we can address them at the time. So as soon as you want the lead time and it's appropriate to do that, you're on the agenda to do so. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, we'll bring this forward with the comp plan amendments later this year. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. If there are no other questions, then we will continue to the city manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner, we have two items under city manager. The first is involving the Lakeland Linder International Airport and some dollars that were received through the CARES Act. As you all know, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act was signed into law in March. It includes $10 billion in funds to be awarded to economic relief to eligible U.S. airports affected by the prevention of, preparation for, or response to the pandemic. The funds are distributed using various formulas for all airports and are part of the national airports that are part of the national airport system. Our airport was notified that a share of the discretionary funds will be sent to them, that being $157,000. The airport intends to use these funds toward its operational expenses such as payroll, other operating costs, or payment of debt service. The airport will be receiving the award within the coming weeks and seeks approvals to execute the grant upon the receipt of the award. So it's being recommended that Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to execute the grant offer from the FAA. It is also requested that the Commission authorize an increase in revenues of $157,000 from the FAA upon receipt of the grant, and no appropriations are required. Gene Conrad's on the line if you have any questions, but good news.
Wonderful news. Any questions for Mr. Conrad? Mr. Reed, Commissioner Reed.
Gene, what would this cover? What kind of shortfalls did we have?
Well, right now, knock on wood, we don't have any shortfalls, but we are able to use this for operational expenses. So whether we use it this year or we use it next year, I mean, we still have however many months, 5 months to go in this year. And if we had some, tenants unfortunately fall out or something like that, it would help cover those expenses if there was some revenue shortfalls for, tenants falling out.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Wonderful. Great provision. Hard for us to argue with. I expected some kind of an objection from Commissioner Franklin. Commissioner Madden.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Gene, for your work on going after that. I did want to know, just even for, our listeners and for on this meeting, it sounds like, wow, great, the airport hasn't had any revenue loss. Could you kind of explain to us how not having Sun and Fun how the funds are different and how even with the loss of not having Sun and Fun, that may, the airport is still in good shape?
Yeah, well, so Sun and Fun obviously is a separate organization. They're a 501c3, so they actually pay us about $350,000 a year to be on the airports, at least about 170 acres on the southwest side of the airport on a year-round basis. And obviously they come outside the fence during the event and occupy about 500 acres. So for us, they're still paying us. For us, we're fine, but for them, they are going to struggle mightily. I know they're working diligently with their various partners and looking at various means to keep going over the next year, to make it to next year, to get to next year's event. And as we discussed several weeks ago, our intent and plan is to work, through the budget process to help them with their lease payments to us next year, to help offset and potentially, waive the entire year of rent from them, so we can help them and they can survive and make it to the next year. So that's what we're looking at right now. Obviously, that will come to the commission for y'all to approve. We'll talk about that in budget. But again, we talked about this several weeks ago, but, from our standpoint, I think that's the right thing to do. They're obviously very, very important to, the airport. They've been here for, 46 years. Next year will be 47. So we obviously need to support them, plus all the aviation educational things that they do on a year-round basis. It's very, very important. So again, we'll plan for that. And we're very, very fortunate having NOAA here, NOAA expanding with Amazon coming on board and all of our tenants that are here, and what we've been able to do as far as our revenue so we can do something like this to help Sun and Fun, because they've really helped, created and put this airport to where it is today, just from their name recognition, what they've been able to do with their event over the last 46 years. So, now that we can help them out, I'm just happy we can do that. And hopefully y'all will approve that and vote on it.
Excellent. And an excellent.
Thank you for sharing that.
Any other comments by committee? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Conrad. We appreciate that input. What is next, City Manager?
The next item is an RFP for broker consulting services for property and casualty insurance to Arthur Gallagher Risk Management Services. As you're familiar, AJ Gallagher is the city's current broker. And for this service, the current contract has been in effect and ongoing with annual renewals since 2012, and was competitively solicited with an RFP this year. The RFP was sent out in January to 80 prospective bidders. Only one responded, that being Arthur J. Gallagher, the incumbent. This insurance provides consulting services for coverage lines, including but not limited to excess workers' compensation, property and boiler machinery, inland marine, excess liability, public officials and employment practices, aviation, sculpture, rail cars, cyber, and crime coverage. The account team with Arthur J. Gallagher is obviously very well diverse in Florida's workman's comp law, sovereign immunity, employment practice, liability, complex property design and placement, railroad car coverage, cyber liability, crime, and how they impact our city. They have proposed a flat annual fee for policies and services of $175,000. The proposed fee for 2020, which includes all policies listed on the report. Once a new contract would begin, all lines that previously included commission will have commission removed, as the compensation for these lines of coverage premium will move from included in the premiums to a flat fee separately. The actual increase in total compensation in 2020 will be $14,614. This increase will be fixed for a 5-year contract term. Obviously, any new lines of coverage will be incorporated into the contract. Thus, it's being recommended the commission approve this award and authorize the appropriate city officials to move forward with the agreement. It would be effective June 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2025, a 3-year contract with 2 one-year renewals. And I know Joyce Diaz is on the line with any questions you may have.
Welcome, Joyce. Commissioner Franklin.
Joyce, is the plan to go out to RFP at 3 years, or is this basically a 5-year deal?
We can go out after 3 years, and it's the 2 one-year renewals after the 3 years. So we have that option should there be some opportunity or a need to do that. Yes.
That would be your preference, wouldn't it, Commissioner Franklin?
Yeah, I just don't. I've never seen a 5-year deal, and even 3 years I think could be kind of long. It's in this case the fixed fee is minor compared to the dollars in the premium, and we're kind of locking into one broker over a rather minor piece of the whole spend. So I just would have some concerns with that. And I was curious too. It looks like does the city's bundle program include everything for Lakeland Electric as well? Is that all city assets?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. When Gallagher comes in and presents to us, are we getting separate teams from their aviation division and their utility division and all the different groups, or is it the Florida Gallagher team?
No, we are actually getting subject matter experts in from different areas based on if we're at the airport, we'll get an engineer who understands the pieces of what we're looking at the airport. When we're out at the McIntosh power plant and the other plants, we get engineers in and underwriters who understand power generation, and
right.
They come in, a couple times a year and review where we're at, the status, our needs, how things are going with us. And then we look at different buildings, different years. So RP funding will go to 1 year. The next year we'll go to Tiger Town. So we're keeping in mind all of the bigger pieces of our property and making sure that we're taking a look at them and they're reviewing them with us.
Okay. I know there's some scales to be seen by bundling things together, but the concern I would have is just with some of the very disparate types of risk that we face. I'm just not sure that one broker is necessarily the best in every one of those areas, but it seems like that would kind of yield a compromise at some point, especially with something as very technical as utility and power generation.
Well, and I do have the area president, Michael Dillon here, if you want to ask some more questions, but he does make sure that they bring on board subject matter experts in those areas.
All right, Commissioner Reed. Thank you, Commissioner Franklin.
Thank you, Mayor Durgan. I concur with Scott Durgan. I had some questions. I read this document and I wasn't sure if the 5 years started previously or it started today. Because is it going to be, Tony? Is it going to be $175,000 fixed for the next 3 years? Is that what I understand? Or is it going to be a 3% percentage rate of the total premium?
From what I've been told, and Joyce can confirm this, it's fixed.
Okay, for 3 years.
It's fixed. 3 years.
And then after that, it would be the option they could change it, or we could put out a new proposal.
That is correct, sir.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it to go more than 3 years personally, like Scott. I think there's some, they do a great job. I know have the capability of they've been doing it, 10, 12 years for us now, I think, haven't they?
Yes.
And I didn't know it was that high. I thought it was somewhere in a little bit less number than that, but it doesn't seem like a great big increase because I know our premium's substantially going up.
Commissioner Walker, and then I think Commissioner Franklin, did you have another question?
Well, just one other. I guess I was under the impression that it was on a fee for service prior to this, but have the policies been on commission based up until now?
The fee for service was with respect to the RFP that went out in 2012. So the specific areas of coverage that were on that RFP is what that fee for service entailed. And then as additional coverages came on board, commissions were then spent out of those additional coverages.
Okay, so the expiring agreement was on a fee for service for all those things originally contemplated, but if new coverages came along, probably cyber and things like that we may not have had back in 2012. Those have been on commission since then. Okay, understand.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure I'm understanding and want to ask my colleague, Commissioner Franklin, if there's some suggestions that you may think that we should be entertaining as a commission and moving forward with the situation. Because just as Commissioner Reed mentioned, I know Gallagher has been around with us as far as long as I've been on the commission, and I think I'm the senior person in some respect. And hearing what I'm hearing by you and the expertise that you do share, what would be some suggestions you think moving forward here?
Well, I just think it's kind of telling that if this is sent out to 80, there are a lot of capable folks out there in the world, and only one who's been the longtime incumbent will even respond to it. I just think, well, partially I think in the timeline is kind of tight. When this was first sent out, and the time to respond is pretty short, and I don't think there was. I don't know, Joyce, were folks given the ability to request a lot more detail to get their arms around what was involved, or did they just get the initial packet?
No, they have the opportunity to come back with questions, and we could provide any other additional information that they needed. That time frame is open for them to be able to do that. We did also provide the property schedule so that they were aware of the scope of property that we have.
Yeah, it's just
probably.
But just in looking back, and I assume this is the most current version, but it looked like a schedule that I had of the timeline for the RFP, and it looked like it was legally advertised on January 23rd, and the written SOQ, statement of qualifications, I guess, had to be received by February 20th. And I would just from my experience, it's hard to do any kind of account in less than a month, but something as sophisticated as this, it seems to me that a lot of people that declined on this probably looked at the timeline and thought that's just not reasonable to comply with. And it definitely inures to the benefit of whoever's been on it for a long time, that others, I think, basically bail by default.
Would you recommend 6 months or so prior to the 3 years?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a 6-month out process, giving people plenty of time, 90 days at least, to be able to get their arms around the scope of the operation and ask the right questions and understand. Because, it's a very good price. I mean, the fee on that for an operation as sophisticated as everything Lakeland's running, that's very competitive. And I think, I just know from where I would be standing on, I'd look at that and see as thinly as that's priced and with the minimal time there is to turn around something without the opportunity to get our arms around it, well, we would probably pass too. Now, we did in our case because I obviously have a conflict of interest, but going forward, I would like to see more time. I think you'd get more people jump into the mix.
And then, Mr. Mayor, if I may, because I asked my colleague to share as he has, but that's what I want to hear, because I know, as he just mentioned, the fee and the what we get out of it, in the sense of what's being proposed by Gallagher, has always been something I think we looked at. You're saying, okay, look, wow, for those of us that may not have as much knowledge as my colleague, but saying that, looks like, okay, with our sophistication that we have here as a city, and what we have to make sure that's been taken care of properly, that dollar amount will seem like it's always been something to say, okay, hey, that's why we're heading this way. But if I'm hearing what he's saying now, then maybe is there any way we can move, or would want to move toward what's being suggested?
Commissioner McCarley.
Commissioner Franklin clarified the timeline. That was my question, so I'm good.
Okay. Commissioner Franklin.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And Commissioner Walker, just to follow up on your question there, it's real easy to get enamored with the fee. And really, at the end of the day, I mean, obviously the premiums are a huge order of magnitude greater than this fee that we're paying. But most importantly, we have to always step back and think of why we're buying the coverage to begin with. It's to be protected in the event of a loss. And so, how claims end up ultimately being paid out is much more relevant, and the dollars can be staggeringly more significant than whatever the low fee is that we get on the front end. And I'm not saying this at all. This is not taking any knocks at the current program. I don't mean that at all. I just think that it's telling with something that should be as attractive an opportunity as the City of Lakeland's program that we can go decades without even having viable competition on it. And I know that there are a lot of quality people, and Gallagher's an outstanding firm, but there are others out there as well. And I think sometimes I would love to see more ideas come to the table than just have a by default that just renews every time because no one else jumps into the process.
Yeah, points well taken. And that's why I wanted to make sure we all are capturing, the essence of what has happened over the decade, like you just said, and how we can move forward to make sure we can get more people to bite into Apple.
And in light of Commissioner Franklin's term, it's a very important conversation for us to have right now, and we're appreciative of that. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Scott, are you suggesting that we might do a 1-year contract and send out a new RFP and give us 6 months?
My preference would have been to have seen it done differently. Yeah, I would, but not sure, Palmer, I can't participate in this process anyway, so I don't have a dog in the hunt, so to speak, other than just as a taxpayer. Yeah, I think so. I think if the RFP timeline were set up differently, I think you'd see a different level of participation.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, and thank you for this discussion, because I do think this is good for all of us and for our residents to be able to hear how we're approaching these issues and contract renewals. And that was a red flag to me too, as far as having one bidder on something of this size. And so I don't know if it's in terms of the process and from a legal standpoint, if we're even able to go back out for bid at this point in the process. If we're not, then I think maybe a shorter contract term makes sense to try and encourage other firms to bid on this and to at least see what options are, to see how competitive is this the best deal for our city, because when we're only getting one bid, it's hard to know that, and it's hard, I think, to defend that as well.
Well, we have an existing contract that's going to expire, so I think we need to move forward.
Yep.
As far as the 1-year deal, the Gallagher's response was based on a longer deal than that. So I don't know if their proposed contract terms would still apply if we do it for 1 year. So that's something we would need to talk to them about. So there are some consequences to changing things.
And the other side of that, it doesn't necessarily, maybe we can make it 2 years or something to make it, to bridge a little problem. The question I would have is it appropriate for us to ask them that question and do it prior to our Monday meeting and give them an opportunity for input? I'm asking you that, Mr. Davis.
Certainly.
Joyce, what would your thoughts be on that? You're at least.
If we want to have that conversation with them, that's something.
Okay. Is it the preference of the commission to have a shorter term than 3 years? Let's start with that. How many thumbs up do we see in that? Okay, so then I think you want to have that conversation and see what you could bring to us on Monday modified for a shorter term. And subsequently, we also want to have at least a minimum of a 3-month window, but I think preferably a 6-month window on something like this to broaden the base of the bidders on renewal. Anything else from any other commissioners?
Mr. Mayor, does it, a quick turnaround asking Gallagher to go ahead and make a quick decision on whether they want to shorten this contract, not necessarily sure what the impacts are based upon the premium that they offered us. Does it make better sense, since this contract needs to renew, or at least need to have someone on board by June 1st, that we table this till the meeting on the 18th to give Gallagher additional time to evaluate?
If they need that length of time, they might. So personally, I wouldn't have an objection to the 18th, other than if they are willing to make that decision in a shorter term period of time, we could talk about it Monday. So why don't we let them tell us that? Make sense? Okay. And, there's a lot of complications in insurance. I could certainly be persuaded to have a 2-year term if the 1-year term is too tight, and it helps them for preserving the pricing, if the other commissioners agree. And Michael, I think your mic's open.
Oh, yes. Well, I figured if it's acceptable to discuss now in the interest of time and the fact that this is an item now, we have a long-term relationship with the city. We're certainly, supportive of amending our original term as bid. In accordance with Mayor Mutz, what you said, obviously our preference would be a 2-year term as opposed to a 1-year term, mainly because if we're looking at a longer period of time on the bid, we're already beginning to work on the 10-1 renewals currently, and just to make sure that there is built enough time and we don't run into the same situation again, that would be our preference. And I think one point of clarification is that, the actual response is not a bid for insurance quotes. It's a bid for services. So, at least from what we see, and we work with a lot of cities, a lot of counties across the state, the time frame was not unreasonable as bid. But completely understand that, that may be the preference to have a longer term, but we'd certainly be agreeable to a 2-year term. I think just given the time and effort we put into responding to the RFP, the pricing that we put together that now all of a sudden is public record and available for everybody on the short term. Ultimately we can discuss further, if that's not acceptable, but if the commission was agreeable to a 2-year term, we'd certainly be agreeable to that.
Comments from commissioners? Well, we have Michael, and that's a pretty quick response, by the way. Yeah, Commissioner Reed. Thank you,
Mayor. I'm agreeable to the 2-year term. Then on our next RFP, it'd be a 90-day period versus a 6-month. I think if hearing what Michael had to say, maybe 90 days would be sufficient. There again, like I say, we're not getting quotes from policies. It's just a review of the documents and see what kind of services they'd have to provide.
Commissioner Walker.
I can agree and concur with what Commissioner Reed said and what Michael, Mr. Gillen has shared with us, okay?
Okay. So on that basis, if we brought it to the Monday meeting as a 2-year term, is there anybody that as a commissioner that has another question they'd like to ask or discomfort to express? I see none. Okay. So I think that's the way we should set it up, and then we can vote on it Monday. Commissioner Reed.
Should I make a motion then? Is that what we want to do, or did I?
Oh, yes, because we can't vote. I was deferring.
We'll do that Monday?
We're broadcast.
You're good motion right now. That'd be Monday.
Yeah, that'll be Monday.
Okay, that's fine. We'll do it on Monday. All right, thank you very much. And Michael, thank you for joining us. I appreciate that. That was very responsive.
Thank you.
Nothing more from city manager's area, Mr. Mayor.
All right, that brings us back to resolutions 1 and 2.
Okay, the first resolution relates to the loss cleaning, clearing, equalization process earlier on the agenda. Number 2 is the actual adoption of a resolution for the amendment of the certification agreement with the Department of Economic Opportunity. And that brings us to miscellaneous. The first non-consent item is just for information only. That is the outside legal fee report for your information, and I will answer any questions you have on that.
Any questions from anyone on the report?
It's just a little bit below the normal average for this time of year. Number 3 is a loan agreement with Impeccable Construction for them to construct 2 single-family affordable homes at 2040 and 2052 Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. Those are a couple of blocks north of Bella Vista Street, just on the west side of Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue there. These are SHIP funds that are available in the amount of $120,000, $60,000 per home. And it's a loan, and once the contractor builds the houses and sells the houses to income qualified buyers, the loan would be paid back to the city. I think Annie Gibson may be on the line if you have further questions on that. It did go through an RFP process. There were 4 respondents. Impeccable Construction's out of Lakeland. Wardell Williams, I think, is the principal of that company.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether or not Ms. Gibson may be able to answer, or if Ms. Mayo still is on the call, in the meeting, excuse me. But certainly appreciate, seeing some additional single-family homes coming into the, I'll call that inner city core area where we have a lot of infill that we have, and I know you've been working on it diligently, trying to support more of what this is all about. Are we seeing any more appetite on the infill that we know we had, and we've been shown in a couple of meetings in the past about the infill areas, and trying to make sure we can partner with developers or however to get some additional single family affordable housing in our community?
Yes, so this agreement here is a result of a specific RFP that was put out to leverage SHIP funds with a builder to construct homes. There's a separate program, and that's the infill lot program that similarly had a request for proposals, and we did receive a number of respondents to that. Currently, we are going through that list and trying to determine which ones have made requests for the same lots. And then we're going to go through a scoring process and award those lots to the people that have shown they've had a demonstrated experience in building and some of the other program requirements. So that is happening as a separate process to this one.
And could you tell me, Ms. Teresa, a number, kind of an approximate kind of a number of how many we're working with, or that particular program is getting ready to help you put more traction on the ground with single-family affordable housing?
I don't recall the number, but if Annie's on the line, if she could provide that information. I want to say that it was somewhere between 10 and 20 applicants that applied for those lots.
Excuse me, Teresa. Yes, sir. We received about 29 requests for about 60 plus lots. So staff at this time, of course, is going through that list and trying to determine which developers or general contractors are best fitted for those lots.
That's excellent, Annie.
Thank you, ma'am. Both of you. Thank you.
Other questions by commissioners? Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I had sent Palmer an email in reference to the provision in this particular contract in reference to default. And I had suggested that we put a fixed percentage rate in that agreement versus highest allowed by law. Reason so, recently we had a case where I had to foreclose on some stuff, and I found out, according to the Florida legislature, the highest reasonable by law is 9%. I thought it was 18%, but unless you state what it is, just 9%. So you can state 12, 15, 18, but 18 is usually the number preferred. Again, that's why I suggested to Palmer that in lieu of default, we have a stated interest rate of 18%.
And we've added 18% in there. I'm not exactly sure what was going on in that foreclosure case. I mean, the statute that I've seen on the max rate is 18, but things happen, weird things happen.
And I think that's just for maybe the state of Florida, but I found out the hard way it was 9%.
So if it is overstated, Mr. Davis, and it's only collectible at 9% rate, is that all right with you?
Well, the statute that I've seen says it is 18%, so I think we're in good shape.
Okay, all right. Any other questions on this? All right, thank you for the good work on getting those two, and love to see the results of the 20 applicants as you get that done, Ms. Gibson. Thanks for your
Thank you very much.
All right, that brings us to 4.
Number 4 is the third extension to our agreement with Ovations Food Services, also known as Spectra. Their existing contract is coming up for expiration, and the Lakeland Center, or the RP Funding Center, had gone out for an RFP in February of this year, and then everything hit the fan, and they've decided to pull back on the RFP because of the impact on the event industry out there, and the effect that would have on responses to our RFP. And they have negotiated with Spectra a extension for an additional year for your consideration. The extension would go until June 30th of 2021. And that would hopefully give if there is a new vendor chosen at that time, that would give them the opportunity to transition in, during the center's slower months as opposed to the holiday season. There is a new commission structure under the proposed extension. You can see in the memo, for gross receipts between 0 and 1.4 million, the commission rate paid to the city would be 25%. Over 1.4 million, the commission rate paid to the city would be 27.5%. There's a guaranteed minimum fee out of all that to Spectra of $65,000. The historic commission rate over the last 3 years has been paid to the city has been 26.6%. So the new structure is in line with historic averages. I know Tony Camarillo is on the line if you have any questions.
Yes. Any questions by commissioners for Mr. Camarillo? Commissioner Reed.
Yes, sir.
Tony, what kind of sales have we had there in the past?
The gross receipts for catering has been about 2 million, 1.9 to 2 million, and that's pretty average over the last few years. So we take in a little less than $500,000 from that contract a year. And sorry, my camera doesn't seem to be working.
That's okay.
I'm smiling.
Just imagine your smiling face.
Thank you.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm glad to see, of course, our city manager along with Mr. Camarillo working with Spectra. I think for historical purposes, the actual vendor we had before Spectra, we had some kind of challenges with that particular vendor, and we got quite a few. I don't say quite a few. Got numerous kind of negative feedback from our community about their particular service and all as it has started to dwindle. But when Spectra came on board, it appears that a whole new, refreshing kind of a experience came about, and I do believe we continue to get good reports from our residents and others who use their particular service there at the RP Funding Center. So I can appreciate, because of what has happened in the way the entertainment arena has been hit as a result of COVID-19, that we can work with this particular vendor and help support them to still remain in business and stay in contract with us. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this way, because we thought the continuity we had, we don't know what it's going to be like coming out of this, but we're already in conversations with them about planning. We got a wonderful relationship with them. We just think it puts our best foot forward when we come out of this, is to have somebody with experience here, and then we're able to service our customers the right way as we come out of this. So that's a big part of this as well.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, and thank you for working with them, Mr. Camarillo. And I agree, they have provided excellent service. All right.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your support and hard work. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day. On 5 and 6, we have on consent, so that brings us to utility. And Ramona Siriani is with us on C1.
Yeah, the last item that we have, this is an extension of the agreement we have with Doble Engineering Services. It's a 3-year extension. It also modifies some of the services and equipment as part of that amendment. Again, it's a 3-year term. The total cost is $46,190 per year for a total cost of $138,570 for the 3-year contract term. Doble provides the engineering services related to and equipment as well to transformer data. LE can upload that data with regard to the transformer testing, and then Doble analyzes that and provides feedback, and they maintain a historical database of different transformers in the industry that's very helpful to Lakeland Electric, and Lakeland Electric has been using these services for quite some time. And this is included in the Lakeland Electric's FY20 budget as well.
And it's in the budget. Very good. Excuse me for interrupting. Does this provide predictive services in terms of problems? Is that part of what the comparator does, or is it a way to compare productivity?
I think it's a testing database as well. I think it does a little bit of both. I believe Scott Fowler is on the line. He can talk about some of the technical aspects of it.
Scott,
yes.
could you?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. It is predictive. We compare our transformers against tens of thousands of transformers around the world.
Excellent. What are the main benefits you get from this service?
The main benefits are, do we see problems in the trending of a transformer? A new transformer costs around $700,000 for our substation transformers, and the larger transformers are about $1.5 million. So if we can spot these trends, which we test annually, if we can spot these trends in the transformers earlier on, we can prevent a failure of a transformer.
Excellent. Other questions by commissioners? All right, seeing none, that looks to be satisfied. Appreciate your comments, Scott.
Thank you.
So that takes us to the, yes, Commissioner McCarley.
Since we're moving to the next thing on the agenda, can we go back and do consent since we're live streaming, and also do the motion? So we're finished with that.
Right. We had 2 earlier votes that we were unaware were not being live streamed at the time, that we decided to defer until Monday, assuming we wouldn't get back up on live streaming, which we are. So Commissioner McCarley is recommending we go back and redo those 2 votes. The first was to approve all of the asterisk items on the City Commission agenda. And we went through each of those asterisk items, and there were no questions beyond what, no challenges to any of them. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
Well, we don't need to do that until Monday. I'm not sure if the request is that I explain those again.
No, you're absolutely
as normal procedure on Monday.
Yeah, you're right. The things that we voted, the 2 things we voted on were the committee reports, and what's the second one?
The move to go back to regular scheduled meetings.
Correct. So let's just repeat that. So do you have a motion, Commissioner McCarley?
Yes, I move that we return to our regularly scheduled commission meetings beginning May 4th.
And a second from Commissioner Walker. Discussion from commissioners? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by holding up your hand. Unanimously passes. The second one was
Committees.
The committees approvals as recommended. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And a second by Commissioner Reed. And discussion on that? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed, same. Unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Bringing us now to Commissioner comments. Anything you'd like to do? Yeah, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I've got this reopen Lakeland Task Force list in front of me.
It's online.
Yes. Are we going to address that today or?
Yes. I had it sent to you immediately before the commission meeting, and some of you may not have opened it up. We actually have a slide on it. If Mr. Cook can put that slide up. These are the names of, we worked diligently the last 3 days to put together people that would participate on this. And I have them in name listing. They were derived by categories of representation. And so Dr. Craig Collins agreed to facilitate. Then you can see each of the names. They have all agreed to participate at this point in time on the committee, where our desire is to try and get that group together as quickly as we can. And so that's why we wanted to try and put together the list first. Tony, you have, our city manager Delgado, you have taken a look at this list as well. And because I was interested in breadth, any comments you'd like to make?
No, I think it's very comprehensive. It touches on so many different areas of our community, everything from our educational system to our health providers, as well as the business entities and public safety. Once again, this is a committee that's being formed by the chamber. They will provide you as city commission policymakers recommendation, but it does not directly fall under the auspices of the city commission.
Correct. Any questions or input on that from any of the commissioners? Or do you see an omission at all? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I looked at this and thought it was very comprehensive, as well as city manager has alluded to. Various, of course, also various, because of professionals, our professions in our community, as well as a community as servant or servant leaders. So that faith-based housing, as he mentioned, health, education, of course, business, certainly. But I thought it was a very good list. I thought we crossed the spectrum, it appears. So I can, of course, align myself to say I would agree to it at this point.
All right. And so if there are no objections, we'll encourage the chamber to dig in. Commissioner Reed, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. There again, I think the list is very comprehensive as well. There again, the only issue I have is I would like for everybody on the list to be a resident of the city limits of Lakeland. There again, I don't think it's prudent for someone from out of town per se, or that doesn't live in the city limits, to be making decisions or make recommendations to us. There again, I just think they need to be a citizen of the city of Lakeland.
Well, some of them are not. Some of them do not live within the city limits, but they're certainly heavily involved in Lakeland. I did think about that consciously as we went through the list, but they also provide expertise that certainly impacts our city and are good voices. And so there are some people that technically do not live within our city limits.
I noticed that. There again, I know we're going to have the ultimate decision, but there again, just a suggestion I hear from people that, they don't, it's not impacting somebody that may be making this decision or recommendation per se.
Well, and the nice thing is, ultimately, that ultimately anything they're recommending becomes our decision. Commissioner Franklin?
Yes, Mayor. Just to, I think maybe a blend of what I think Commissioner Reed's getting at and where you are is I do see a number of those who may not be city residents, but they're business owners in the city of Lakeland. And I think, not to speak for Commissioner Reed, but I think the spirit of where I thought he was going with that is that they ought to be people who have a stake either as residents or business owners. I would agree we shouldn't have even experts who have no dog in the hunt within our own city limits.
Right, and I believe I can say this accurately that there's no one on that list that does not. City Manager Delgado, I saw your hand too.
No, Commissioner Franklin took the words out of my mouth. This list, as I looked at it, and once again, I don't get to choose, but as I looked at it, it was a mix of both residents and business owners. We must be conscious of the fact that this is directly aimed at economics. And so many of these people have some expertise also in the economics of our community.
Any other comments? Commissioner Walker.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, and I will have to concur because as I looked at it when it first was brought to my attention and start perusing the list, the first thing I had in my mind, was the economics. And even though we don't, there are a few, as you indicated, they don't live in the core city limits area, but they do own businesses in our city. So that would made me say, okay, I can have a buy-in to say they should be a part of this process.
All right. So I do want to compliment Corey Skates on the hard work of putting this together and the great coordination that he and I have had the last couple of days in getting in contact with these people. So they're willing, and if there are no objections or additions to this, then I think, or recommendations, even though this is the Chamber's project, we wanted to run it by you first, just to make sure, since we'd be taking some input, that we were being as inclusive as you'd like. I certainly wanted that because if I'm going to chair this on your behalf, I want to make sure we're spending time with the right people. So thank you for putting that up, Mr. Cook. And anything else you wanted to add to that, Commissioner Reed? Was that the only issue on that? Okay. Something that I'd like us to have some discussion on, only on a guidance basis, and this isn't for policy, is we're talking about doing the 25% program that we have on eating in restaurants as of May 4th. And then it has been at least flushed out that we might want to do tables on the streets, and there's some pros and cons with respect to that. And primarily probably from the cleanliness standpoint, we would certainly, any business that has a sidewalk and the capacity to put tables in front of that doesn't block traffic can do that anyway. So the question was, would we want to consider expanding onto streets, closing streets to provide some of the restaurants in the core downtown some opportunity to do that? I'd like it if we could just have a little discussion of perspective there, just so that we can aid the restaurant owners in thinking about what they can be planning for appropriately. I was on a call yesterday, by the way, that talked about how packaging providers are going to become so much more important because of individual salts, individual peppers, individual ketchups, and all those kinds of goods become more important than having common bottles that people are grabbing as examples of the differences in the way we would see services provided. Any comments on the tables and closing streets? Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. I was really glad you brought this up at the meeting the other day. I think most of us received a request from a citizen, Ellen Bagden, who emailed us with this idea probably about a week ago. And, so like I said, we don't get to talk, but I'm assuming everyone received that. And then the mayor brought it up at our last meeting. So I had really thought that was great idea to be able to support our downtown restaurants, to give them a little more space to social distance. So, I think as a city, if we went through extraordinary measures to close down things, we could do extraordinary measures to open up things and support, to kind of augment some of the revenues that they've lost over the last several weeks. I think any way we can help them, certainly we can't make people come downtown even though it's open. So we don't know if there's going to be overwhelming support for the restaurants or if people will still be reticent to try. But I think showing our residents that we are trying to provide a safe, open space might give them, a better appetite, to use that pun, to try to come downtown and think, wow, if I know I can sit 6 feet apart outside, I'd really like to go out to dinner and try this out. So I certainly don't think it's necessarily ongoing. I do know that Julie Townsend had mentioned when we brought it up before, just because some cities have opened up their streets on Friday and Saturday nights to have, more of that nightlife and just, fun, festive atmosphere for pedestrians. And she didn't think at the time that the downtown folks really, were interested in doing that. So I don't necessarily think of it as something permanent or necessarily ongoing, but if we could have, like I said, extraordinary measures to do whatever possible to help them recoup some of the lost revenue while they're only at 25 capacity and see how that goes. I think it's worth it to just show how much we want them to survive and how much we want, to give them space to do it. I do also know that Julie mentioned that she was going to survey those restaurants, because if folks are not interested in coming out, even though they're open, and they'd prefer to have those lanes for curbside pickup, we don't want to, go open them up and then all of a sudden we preclude sales, because we've, taken away the curbside feature. So I think Julie had mentioned Friday and Saturday night. I mean, I'd like to see it open at lunch, for everyone who's going back to work, to be able to go and sit outside and have a social distance spot to have lunch too. But, I don't know how extraordinary those actions would be to have, the streets closed. And then I know that also Nicole Travis had mentioned that with Summit's construction and the Massachusetts, street maybe having, being closed, that might cause some other traffic problems downtown. So I know there's a lot of variables, but I am absolutely interested in the discussion and hearing from, our folks downtown to see if they think that would help them, be more welcoming to guests as we open.
Commissioner McCarley.
I completely agree with Commissioner Madden. The more we can do to support our local business, I would be interested in, and Commissioner Franklin, I don't know if you know, as the LDBA board member, but on that survey that Julie's producing, do we have a feeling of who wants to open up at the 25%? Because I would think the cost incurred, if they have to have a full staff, even for 25%, it might be above what they're willing to pay. They might continue, as Mrs. Madden said, to do curbside. Do you have any numbers yet, or has she pushed that survey out yet? Do you know?
Julie's on.
My guess is she's on. I was going to say she could probably call in and comment on that directly.
Hey, yes, I just came online. Most of the businesses are going to open. I haven't heard of anyone so far that has told me that they're going to stay curbside only. All the people that I've reached out to, every single one is, yes, we're opening. Yes, we're opening. Yes, we're opening.
Okay. Julie,
Thank you for that. Sorry.
on any concerns, if you have them, with respect to this, pros or cons.
Well, I had shared with Tony and Commissioner Madden sort of the concerns of the having the street closed and putting tables and chairs in the street. Obviously, any logistics of getting tables and chairs we'll figure out. We won't let that be an obstacle. I think I haven't gotten a good consensus yet from the businesses on that. I've struggled to get them to sort of answer that question. But my initial suggestion was really just for once a week, not on any kind of permanent basis. And if you recall, several months ago, it was sort of put out there that as a suggestion to perhaps close South Kentucky permanently and make it a pedestrian thoroughfare, and the businesses on that block were wholeheartedly opposed to that idea. And I know that many of your staff are opposed to that as well. It breaks the ability to keep traffic flow and hurts the grid. And I think just in terms of, yes, there was a lot of construction with Heritage Plaza, but the street being closed that for 9 months and the damage that it did to the businesses in terms of their sales, just it cut them off. And I think you would see that may not be as damaging if there's just no construction, but the closing of a street in the middle of a downtown like that is not, I don't think is the right thing to do. So they're not in favor of that on a permanent basis. I've had 1 or 2 reach out to me concerned that even closing it 1 day a week might be a slippery slope into making it, suggesting that it be permanent. So I just don't have consensus yet. And I have been talking with some of them about, well, if we don't close the street, what if we did parklets where, we could create with just some quick planters and fencing, but we have to get with Public Works. I'm on a call with them later today about what kind of materials could we possibly do. We don't want anything flying into the street. So long story short, we're not there yet in terms of making a decision, at least in consensus building among those businesses yet. But, I don't think it's a closed door discussion.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. I've noticed that in the diet program is obviously working along South Florida Avenue. And of course, I would hate if we implement something along that neighborhood with temporary barriers. If a car were to get out of whack and hit some people on the extended area that they may try to take advantage of. So we might need to address that area specifically, or it's just a thought. I'd hate for someone to have a wreck along that area, crash through one of the barriers and damage some of our citizens.
Well, I think this discussion has been confined to downtown initially anyway.
Well, I just did want to make sure that people didn't get the wrong idea and try to expand that area other than the core city.
Got it. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I can concur with what I'm hearing from both, I guess, a couple of my colleagues already about, and I'm palatable, with, making the move towards supporting as best we can our restaurants in that core downtown area. But again, I think it's public safety that's ultimately important to make sure we can still have the traffic flow or the traffic, the grid, as I heard Ms. Townsend refer to, not being interrupted or cause any other particular challenge when it comes to public safety. So I know I will have to, I would defer that to people like community and economic development people in transportation, Nicole Travis and the police, with Chief Garcia, just to see if it can become something that can happen again. I think we all would probably say we want to make sure we can do whatever we can to help support our businesses, our local businesses, being restaurants, retail, whomever, to get back to some form of money making and getting back to some normalities as best. So I would not be against anything as long as it's not going to cause an disruption with public safety and that kind of thing. So that would be my particular opinion on it.
Community and Economic Development Director Travis, could you just weigh in from your perspective a few ideas?
Good morning, Mayor. We have been in constant communication with Julie Townsend about supporting the businesses as best as we can. And if that means some seating in parking spaces, we are going to work with Public Works and LPD to make sure that we're safe, because they're local roads, so FDOT is not involved. And so there's a local decisions that we can make to make that work. So whatever we can do to support our businesses on a temporary basis, and we probably will start, if we get some consensus from the businesses, maybe trying it one day in the evening, see what the logistics look like, whether it works for the business or is it more cumbersome. And then if we can scale it up, we'll do that. We just need to evaluate that. And as mentioned earlier by Commissioner Madden, the traffic impacts from the reducing the lanes on Massachusetts Avenue with Summit's construction. And so I think it's not going to be a cut and dry decision. I think it'll just evolve as we learn more and we see what the patterns are, and then we can scale it up or scale it back if we need to.
Well, I think the good news in that is that it lets the 25% get open, you know, and start that space. You can keep that dialogue going. We could move into it. We could do a trial. We could find out it may be able to expand even to lunches, you know, at some point in time. I know I believe we all got an email this morning from the Lakeland Valet Service. And that's another aspect that can be measured. You know, would it be nice for people to be able to go to a place that doesn't take up traffic down the street and have the food brought to us that we may have ordered online or by phone and in advance, so that we can keep some of those areas open. So all of that can be mixed into that conversation, I think. Any other comments? Commissioner McLeod, and then Madden.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely would be on board with trying one of these approaches, whether it is making street spaces available or parking spaces, trying to be creative where we can to support these businesses. I think, as many of you have said, that the feedback from restaurants and local businesses will be key in seeing what do they support, and making sure we're aligning with that and not putting out a solution that doesn't work for them. And then certainly would want to hear, you know, once we get that feedback, what is staff recommending from the the traffic standpoint, from the public safety standpoint, and what does that look like? And I think what I'm hearing is that we're in that direction. We all seem to be on the same page with that. I think the missing element right now is just the specific feedback from the downtown business community.
Good. Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for everyone with your, different thoughts. It certainly has a lot of facets to this, idea. One of the things that, for us to say, well, yay, we're open at 25%. I would love to see, Julie show us a little bit more, with regard to what does that mean, for Mitchell's. Can they know, they can have one person for every 4 they could have had in their line before? Can you have people in a line and just not seated? If they're in a line, do they have to be 6 feet apart? What does that do to Fresco's in 1961? If they had 4 tables, now they can have 1 table. So like I said, we could open and have no one show up. And then we have, this is just a moot issue. But if people are excited, to go out to eat and, go to lunch and go on a date, what do they do? I mean, sorry, we can only have 1 table now in the front out of those 4, and in the back we have 6 tables, so we can have 1.5 there. And 25%, when you're talking about a restaurant, is not going to replace a lot of revenue that they've lost being closed for the last several weeks. So, I know as a business owner myself, I mean, and I've seen, at Publix, they have, everybody has scrambled to get arrows to, show direction and put tape on the ground to show 6 feet apart and to move all of your cubicles and your office spaces and desks 6 feet apart. So I'd like to know, with our restaurants downtown, 25%, I don't think anybody really thinks about like what that looks like for these people. And so I know that, we could talk about all of the difficulties and, getting it clean and shutting down the streets. But I think really urgency, if we can't do something quickly, to just help them know that we're open for business and say, hey, we have this week where we're going to be in the streets just to make everyone feel comfortable, is kind of what I was thinking. Because, in a couple of weeks, hopefully we'll be at phase 2, and then we'll be at 50%. And then hopefully, a month from now we'll be at, whatever. But, my whole goal was really more like, what do we do immediately to help people, be open and accommodate as many people as would like to eat at their restaurant, and not, kind of be rationing or having lines and not be able to let people in. But like I said, I mean, I don't even know if people will be, scrambling to get in. Maybe people don't have any money to spend and won't be going out. So, I just want kind of some context. Like it's really not to try to have a new policy and to go through a lot of red tape and to figure out, like when we could do this and how we could implement. I think by that time, we missed the point. The point is to just try to help these people recover and get more revenue rather than less in a short amount of time so that they can survive.
And I think that's in sync with what Julie was saying, and Commissioner McLeod and McCarley, and in terms of giving them some flex to go forward. City Manager Delgado.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Madden, for bringing that issue up, because if you take a look at the executive order that's been provided by the governor, it's once again a little ambiguous as to what that 25% means. Is it 25% of your normal capacity, or capacity that's provided by the fire marshal, or is it 25% of what tables you currently have there? So I'm hoping, and I've asked our lobbyist to see if he can find some additional information regarding that, because that's a little ambiguous, and it's going to make it hard for our restaurateurs to really understand what that means. And so, and I've seen a lot of chatter on social media, people asking that same question: what does that mean, 25%? And so I'm hoping we can get some additional direction. I'm not sure we will, but I'm hoping we can get some additional direction.
Julie, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think that is very confusing, and the downtown merchants have certainly asked those questions as well, talking about, is it square footage, is it number of seats? I think they're going to, take 25% of their tables and put notes on the others, or signs on the others saying, don't sit here, or this is not available, and that's what they did at the 50% mark when that happened. But also, the public's going to keep them in check. It's not like the police are going to be walking in and out of all these restaurants saying, you're at 37%, we're going to, fine you. Again, Facebook and social media, the public's going to keep people in check and call out the ones who are overstuffing their restaurants and businesses, because that's what's already been happening in terms of ones that have bad practices for social distancing. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be different for everyone. As Commissioner Madden said, you've got Mitchell's, who has you order at the counter and there's a line, and then you sit, and then Fresco's is table service, and so every one of them is different, and they're all sort of, we're all talking about what the best practices are, and I shared the CDC best practices with them as well. But I think the curbside is going to be still very, very important, and that's why I'm waiting to hear from each one of them. Adding some extra tables in the street, is that going to be more important to them than keeping the lanes of traffic open so those people can get to them curbside? And I know the valet service has made an offer to us, but somebody's got to pay them, so I got to get LDDA approval if that's something that we're going to use our funds for.
Right. Any other comments? Why don't you touch base on farmers market, Julie, while we're here, and just some thoughts?
Yeah, so I had spoken with the mayor about possibly a timeline for reopening the farmers market. I had kind of pitched that to the board, the LDDA board, via email individually, of course, no discussion. A while back, and it was too soon when I first sort of broached it, but my vendors were desperate, and we were all sort of scrambling. But long story short, if we are looking at hospitalization numbers and death numbers continuing to decline in our area, then I think that we have an opportunity to start bringing the farmers market back. Got some folks outside with loud music. And we're looking at the end of May, again, consulting with the LDDA board and getting their approval, but ultimately it's the city's property. So you guys have to give us permission to even consider it. And the thought was to spread the market out all the way from Oak to Lemon and not stop at the railroad tracks. There wouldn't be any other events that we would be conflicting with, like that would happen in Munn Park, that we would conflict with. That would space the vendors out 20 feet from each other, which would also obviously space the patrons out. And that way we could require everyone to wear masks. We can have the vendors reconfigure their booths so that people are not walking into their space and shopping and touching. More of I'm standing in front of my booth, and you kind of point to what you want, and I hand it to you. So that's what I've pitched to the vendors. They're all very excited, obviously, to try to get back to work. And so again, ultimately it's your property, and with the city not renting any facilities, you know, it kind of puts you in a position of saying, well, we're going to make this exception.
So Commissioner McLeod, great.
Thank you, Julie. I saw where you had mentioned some other markets around Florida and even beyond or have stayed open. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, several of them have stayed open, and some are doing drive-through service where they pre-ordered and then you just pick up. But we're doing a pre-order pickup service through my office. That isn't going very well for us. We are, you know, teeny tiny sales. Other markets have a more robust produce and farmer population among their vendors, and I think that's what the draw is. Several of our true farmers are operating out of their own sites, and so that's kind of made ours a little less, you know, farmer focused, and it's more of our the artisans and the food vendors like the beef jerky and, you know, the sauces and things like that. So we haven't had a really robust drop-off, pickup, order online situation. And other farmers, other markets that people are allowed to shop in, there's been some difficulty and some challenges in terms of chaos with people, you know, not keeping their distancing. At least it was last month. I think they've gotten a little bit better, but they're spreading their vendors out. They're very far apart, and they're, you know, having people walk in patterns, and some of them have only invited back their food vendors. I would suggest, since now that we've allowed retail to reopen, that we would invite our retail vendors as well. But for now, the markets that are open are purely food only, and all the other vendors, the artisans, the crafters, were not invited to participate.
Additional questions or thoughts on this? End of May seem like a reasonable target to you? Just trying to.
I think so. I do. I like the plan Julie's laid out. I think you've given thought to spacing of vendors and how to really do that effectively and thoughtfully. And it is outdoors. And so I think as we're learning more through this, that, you know, outdoor areas seem to pose less of a risk. And so I think whatever we can do to shoot for end of May, you know, if something changes, as you mentioned, I mean, we can certainly reevaluate, but I'm on board with that.
And the other thing is that it really does help the retail vendors and the restaurants if we can, you know, bring the market folks back. We typically close in August, but we had discussed at the last meeting, Commissioner McCarley even maybe suggested not closing in the normal month that we're closed, and vendors are totally on board with that. I know the retail stores are very unhappy when we close in August because sales go down for them as well. So we would, if we open in May, we would just power through and not take August off.
Good. No objections by anybody or concerns? Good. Thank you, Julie, for your time very much. I want to point out one other conversation that we have weekly. City Manager Delgado and I have the privilege of being able to talk to the LRH executive team weekly about status. I was a little optimistic, I think, this week in that call, anticipating that, you know, as we start to move in these first phases, that the hospital is going to be more encouraged about how things are going as well. And the call was a little more sobering than I anticipated. And so I want to mention that to you. There was a patient that was very young that had been affected in a short amount of time, who was in very critical condition. Sometimes the virus responds to people in ways that are brutal and very fast. So that's an encouragement for people to recognize if they're having any of the symptoms and they're concerned about it, to make sure that they get the testing, and if they need to get towards hospitalization, certainly the respiratory center that we have available on Pablo is a place to be able to go. But the other conversation was that literally this is a very heavy in weight virus, unlike most viruses. So when people expel, it drops the tables, and the value in the masking, which my cautioning in all of this is that as we start to reopen, we can start to relax and think, okay, everything's business as usual, when in fact, we still need to encourage people to follow good protocols and good disciplines. So hand washing is hugely important. Masks are important. I even got masks. Just so that you know, I'm not a mask wearer, and I'm going to start wearing masks in public as a result of that. Also get some grimaces sometimes from people because I don't have a mask on, I might point out. But nonetheless, the real reason is because the mask protects if you expel some droplets and you are an asymptomatic carrier, as well as being able to pick those things up. But to recognize that the horizontal surfaces are where this virus drops and sits, and how important it is to make sure you're cleaning horizontal surfaces, anything people are touching, and that although we are not in the crisis mode that we thought we have a diligence to work to protect. We need to continue to encourage people to safeguard and to follow these protocols. This becomes particularly important as we are allowing our businesses to open back up, for them to think about how they want people to be while they're in their store. And if they want to be able to provide masks, obviously in a restaurant, it would be a little difficult to eat with masks on. So that's going to be a different operation. But as you come in and out, you know, you may want to have some of those criteria. If people are picking up foods that you may want to have, and they come into your restaurant, you may want to have some of those encouragements, not for a policing standpoint, just for people's health, yours as well as other people's as well. And so when we listened to the concerns, it was important to kind of just make me recognize we have we're a longer crawl out on this than we'd like to think. And I do think it is a crawl, walk, run kind of scenario for us as we go along and measure along the way. The measurements are part of what there's discussion about too. For us, I think watching hospitalizations is important, and watching deaths per week and the rate of those is important, and where they come from. So as you probably know, the majority of our deaths at the hospital have been in one group. That's an important thing to know, because it makes a big difference in the way that you look at how broadly spread this is, and also how critically important it is to respond to the needs of a problem area in an appropriate way. So just to encourage us to think of this as a process. And so that's probably why this whole community development discussion about the tables outside is good as a gradual process a little bit, because it first lets them go with what are we doing inside, and how do we work that differently with the employees that we have? How do we broaden it out maybe to an outside table scenario? This is going to be true as we work this reopen Lakeland discussion. And one of the things we want to see in this is, what do people recommend? What are some practical steps that can take place? What are some creative ways to keep problems from occurring that we can do? So just a word of cautioning with respect to the healthcare side of this. We've still got a long way to go. Any additional comments from anyone else? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And not a subject of COVID-19, it's my comment or my ask at this time with my colleagues, because as you know, we do not get the chance to talk or share and try to stay away from that as much as we can, because you don't want to violate some particular law that we know could get us in some trouble. But I do need to ask, and hopefully this is the right time to do that, even though we've been inundated with COVID-19 for the last 5 weeks or more here among ourselves in the city. At this point, so you would know, there's a process happening on the state level with FLC that I have thrown my name back in the hat again for a position in that particular organization. So I'm asking my colleagues, along with the mayor, if you will consider doing a letter of recommendation for myself to support that particular process. It's starting to happen here very shortly in the next few days. We don't know whether or not how, at this point, as I understand, the annual meeting would be for the annual FLC conference that usually comes about in August, whether it may be just virtual only, or could it be a combination of something at a particular location along with some virtual significance for people who may not want to travel. There is a board a meeting coming up, of course, next month that, and that's the reason for my ask to, that I have to be a part of to continue this process that I plan to enter, what I've already entered into, to be considered for that state position. So I'm looking at, of course, putting my name in the hat again for the second vice president position on the state level, and which I've already done, and we have to go before the nominating committee. And this has already been planned to be either virtual in some regard at this point in the next few weeks.
Done. Appreciate that and appreciate your work representing us in that regard. Any other comments from commissioners?
Well, thank you all. I didn't hear, I heard Don from the mayor, but I know he's one of us 6 or 7. So
you got many more thumbs. All right.
And I appreciate your support. And I would need to get that letter from you, Mr. Mayor, or you and the city manager, however you all want to do it. I need to get that the next few days, if you don't mind.
I'll get it out today. And that, and include all the commissioners as a part of that support.
Okay. That's fine. Yes. Thank you so much.
I'll get it done today. What else? Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to know if we had an update on how the census was going in our area.
I saw it yesterday, and it was a 53% level. If my number's right, it's not too far off.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. I was going to chime in too. I think we're doing very well in our community. From what I hear across the state, with some other numbers, of course we're only about a month out, in a sense of having the census tracking being done. But I think we're doing pretty well.
Well, it's important to do. If you have not done the census, you need to do yours. And they've done 2 mailings at this point in time, so that every household has gotten it. And it's a picture of who's in your house when you complete it. Commissioner McCarley. Or no, I'm City Community and Economic Development Director Travis. Boy, I'm glad I don't have to say that often.
You know that our department has been working really closely with the county's census team, and Jonathan Rodriguez has been leading that effort for our department, and we can provide you guys with a report later this afternoon through the city manager.
Good. Anything you have in mind, Ms. Travis, on ways that we could encourage this that we're not doing currently?
Well, initially we paid for some ad service for the ads to be run in the movie theaters. The movies are now closed. We have a billboard since we can't do door to door right now. And so I think as long as we continue to promote it in our social media, even though that's just one outlet, we're trying to come up with other creative ways on how to do that. We explored putting clings on city cars just to promote taking the census, and I know that the deadline has been extended some, and so we are trying to regroup because some of our efforts have been stifled a little bit, particularly with the movie theater ads. So we'll regroup and let you know.
Okay, great. Commissioner Walker.
I think I'm sure Mr. Cole is very aware of this because I know her team through Lynn Simpkins, Ms. Lynn Simpkins in the Neighborhood Association Group, Coalition, I should say. The challenging aspect of census, and we are probably keenly aware of it as community leaders and elected officials, is your minority communities. Especially the African American is one of them, but of course the Latino, Hispanic community is very much so, can be very apprehensive about doing or taking the census. So whatever we can do and try to encourage both those communities, both those ethnicities to be involved will be very much so, I think, a good sale for us, of course, to because we want everyone counted and everyone numbers. I want numbers to be good, and so it reflect the dollars that we'll get. So I know those two communities are very challenging, especially so.
We might even think about, Commissioner Walker, creating a video that includes making certain that churches and chambers, the minority chambers, get that out to its members and on their feeds as well. And that would allow us to be able to have a broader audience and target it on those two areas of ethnicity.
I do know that the churches, I can't speak for so much the Latino Hispanic community, but I know the churches through the ministers or senior pastors, and I think the contact that Ms. Simpkins has made, again, through the NAC and the IMA, I think they've done, they run the announcements. I know they run the announcements, they're sharing with their congregations, but again, if a video can be done in time to make it happen, sure, whatever means of creativity that comes up.
Okay, good. Yes. It's Travis.
Mayor, the NAC, we did a census presentation to the NAC back in February. We've also recorded 2 videos, both of which you were in Spanish as well for our minority communities. And our efforts have been primarily focused on our undercounted neighborhoods and census tracts. So we've been focusing heavily on those areas.
Nicole, Kevin, I don't know if it's helpful, but if I can be useful for any Spanish language videos, happy to do that. You know, if that becomes important, I'll leave that to you, but just know you can call me whenever.
I appreciate it. And the video on Telemundo.
Commissioner McCarley and then Mr. Cook.
Yeah, I'm glad that Ms. Travis brought up the meeting in February where there was a presentation for the Neighborhood Association Coalition. Polk Vision pushed that out really wholeheartedly, as well as the transit team, Tom Phillips' team. I believe they have some ads on their buses that are throughout the city. So I think we've been covering them pretty well. And the Neighborhood Association, we have another meeting coming up, I believe, next week. So we can reinforce it there again.
Good. Mr. Cook.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate just a little bit of what Nicole stated as well. We have a pretty robust social media campaign that runs through August. And we also, and she touched base on it, we did the video with you speaking that we're trying our best to get that to the churches. So if any of you have any contacts with churches that have video that could show that, we reached out to a number that we're aware of. We'll certainly get that out as well. Just wanted to elaborate on that.
Perfect. Any other comments? That was Commissioner Walker.
If I heard Mr. Cook correct, now you're saying you have reached out? Because I'm not aware of the video coming through a couple of churches that I've kind of spent time with quite a bit. Are you giving the video to them? What was it again?
As I stated, we don't know every church that has video capability. So if you have some that you're aware of, please send me an email and we'll get them the video.
And my recommendation would be you just send him the contact person of those churches, Commissioner Walker, so he can include them in his list.
I'll make sure I give it to you right away.
Good.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we've also been running ads on the radio in both English and Spanish as PSAs, and the Neighborhood Association meeting is rescheduled for May 21st. And so we will continue to promote through that venue with the NAC. And I'm looking at all forms of media that I have now. I have Brian and Jonathan Rodriguez sending updates, and we'll provide you guys all with the links to the videos so that you can share them with your contacts as well, and you can push them out through the different areas of influence and channels that you have.
Which we all need to do. That's an excellent idea. And just people need to recognize this is super important to our future.
Yes.
For lots of reasons.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Madden, for bringing that up. Other comments? All right. Oh, yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to ask either Chief Garcia, if he's on the line, or Tony to update us and the public on where we are with the Citizens Advisory Board for the police department. I know we've received the email update and we've got the applications, but just to, I know there were some changes to the timeline because of everything we've been going through, and just an update on that if you can.
I'll do a quick update, and Chief Garcia could get into some of the details. Obviously, nothing has changed regarding the criteria and what our plans are to go ahead and move forward with a citizens advisory board with the LPD. We had kicked this off at the end of the year in hopes that by the time we reached April, we would have selections already in place to start having meetings in May, or at least the initial kickoff meeting, so that folks can become more involved with our Lakeland Police Department. And Chief will talk a little bit about what that involvement entails. Unfortunately, with the current pandemic challenge, things have been pushed back a bit. We have received a number of applicants. Those applicants were provided to each one of you. Each commissioner is asked to select one applicant to sit on the board. We have the applications now in your city commission mailboxes. If you want to come pick them up, or if we need to go ahead and have them delivered, please let us know so we can get them to you. The chief and I will then have the opportunity to select one additional member to the board of 7 that you select. But our goal is to try to get these selections done by the end of May, understanding where the governor might be with his phase 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, this is going to be a meeting that we need to bring people together, or at least do virtually, but we'd like to have everybody together so the chief and his staff can spend some time with them. And so with that, Chief, you want to add a little bit about what your thoughts are on it?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And good morning. We're certainly encouraged by all the folks that put in for an opportunity to serve on this board. A great gathering throughout the whole city that we saw registered, take an opportunity to do this. So we're ready to go. We're just waiting for an opportunity, as the city manager said, that we can get everyone in the same room. And that test, we think is very important that we all get to meet kind of face to face to get this started off, since we're coming in from all different directions. And we'll be able to get a good foundation to start with once we're able to meet again. But we look forward to doing it.
Tony, did you say when you need our nominations to you?
Yeah, I think in the email I sent to you, I think it was May 25th, but I'll double check. But I did send an email out to each one of the commissioners with a listing, at least the Excel spreadsheet listing of who's applied, where they live. As you know, the members have to live within the city of Lakeland. And so, or Chief, did we make that the electric service territory? But I thought it was the city.
Yes, sir, within the city limits.
Yeah, and so it has the addresses where they live, and also has some of their occupations. I believe we designated the 25th, but I will double check, but we did send an email. So hopefully we have your selections by then.
All right. Anything else? Good question. If there's nothing more, and I saw our city clerk Coos actually yawned just then, then maybe we should accept a motion to adjourn. Seeing one from Commissioner Walker and a second from Commissioner McCarley. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same. We are adjourned. Thank you for your time very much.